The Vietnam War produced heroes, survivors, and strategists, but for every brilliant mind, there were twice as many blunders committed by men who should never have been anywhere near the steering wheel of a global conflict. This is the story of the leaders, planners, and policymakers whose ignorance, arrogance, and catastrophic misjudgments transformed a regional crisis into one of the most devastating disasters in American military history. Robert McNamara. When Robert S. McNamara entered the Pentagon in 1961, he didn't come armed with military experience or battlefield wisdom. What he did bring was a shiny MBA, a career at Ford Motor Company, and an unshakable belief that wars could be solved with bar graphs and spreadsheets. To him, Vietnam wasn't a country. It was a math equation waiting to be conquered by efficiency, kill ratios, and colorful charts. His master plan? Turn the Pentagon into the world's biggest analytics lab in Vietnam into a giant statistical experiment. If you could count it, you could control it. Body counts, bombing tallies, helicopter sorties, gallons of fuel burned. Every number fed the illusion that progress was inevitable. But numbers lie when the strategy behind them is built on fantasy. Under McNamara's guidance, small advisory missions spiraled into full-blown escalation. By 1968, the U.S. had over 500,000 troops in Vietnam, with no clear objective except increase pressure until something breaks. His signature concept, search and destroy, looked efficient in theory, but resulted in villages being raided, civilians being terrorized, and resentment burning hotter than napalm. McNamara only admitted decades later that the entire approach was disastrously flawed, but by then tens of thousands of Americans and millions of Vietnamese were already gone. No spreadsheet could undo that damage. Ngo Dinh Diem. Installed by U.S. backing after French colonial rule collapsed, Ngo Dinh Diem was supposed to be the democratic anchor of South Vietnam. Instead, he governed like a feudal lord dropped into the 20th century, obsessed with loyalty, paranoia, and maintaining absolute control. A devout Catholic ruling a predominantly Buddhist nation, Diem filled the government with relatives, turned ministries into private family estates, and unleashed his brother Ngo Dinh Diem, a man whispered to be linked to the opium trade, to run a brutal secret police force. Elections became ceremonies, dissent became treason, and policies heavily favored his loyalists while alienating everyone else. The breaking point arrived in 1963. When government troops opened fire on peaceful Buddhist demonstrators, the backlash shook the country. Then came the haunting image that echoed around the globe. Thich Quang Duc, a Buddhist monk, sitting calmly as he lit himself on fire in Saigon's streets. The world was horrified. Diem blamed the Buddhists. Washington lost patience. When American officials quietly supported a coup, Diem tried to flee to a church for safety. Hours later, he and his brother were shot in the back of an armored vehicle, their deaths marking the start of even deeper chaos. The U.S. had spent years propping up a man whose policies helped ignite the very rebellion they hoped to suppress. His downfall left a government so unstable that it collapsed again and again, creating the political vacuum that fueled the Viet Cong's rise. General William Westmoreland. William Westmoreland, appointed by President Johnson to lead the war effort, believed victory would come from overwhelming firepower, superior technology, and one simple rule: kill more of them than they kill of us. He treated Vietnam like a scoreboard. Every rising body count meant progress. The problem? He didn't understand the game he was playing. Vietnam was not a war of attrition. It was a war of endurance. North Vietnamese fighters didn't care about casualty numbers. They cared about outlasting the Americans. Westmoreland flooded the countryside with U.S. troops, helicopters, and aggressive operations. But every search and destroy mission created new enemies. Every burned village turned neutral villagers into Viet Cong sympathizers. And every optimistic press briefing only widened the gap between Pentagon promises and battlefield reality. Then came the shock that exposed everything: the Tet Offensive of 1968. As Westmoreland publicly declared victory was near, North Vietnam launched a massive coordinated attack, on over 100 South Vietnamese cities, including the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. The assault stunned Washington, shattered American trust, and demolished Westmoreland's credibility. He was quietly reassigned soon after, his legacy defined by a fundamental misunderstanding of the war he was supposed to win. Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon Johnson accomplished more in domestic policy than nearly any American president: civil rights, Medicare, education reform. But when it came to Vietnam, his instincts imploded. Terrified of being the president who lost Vietnam, Johnson escalated the conflict with reckless determination. After the disputed Gulf of Tonkin incident, he secured sweeping powers from Congress and used them to intensify bombings and deploy thousands more troops. But instead of trusting his generals, Johnson micromanaged the war from Washington. He reviewed bombing targets personally, often choosing which bridges to hit as if selecting items off a menu. As casualties rose and progress stalled, public patience crumbled. Protests exploded across campuses and cities. The nation fractured. Johnson's approval rating collapsed. In a stunning announcement, he declared he would not seek re-election. He died only months after U.S. troops finally began withdrawing, leaving behind a fractured country and a war that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. The Strategic Hamlet program. If there was ever a plan destined to backfire, it was the Strategic Hamlet program. In theory, it aimed to protect villagers from Viet Cong influence by relocating them into fortified hamlets. In reality, it uprooted millions of rural families, destroyed their communities, and turned entire regions against the South Vietnamese government. Hamlets were thrown together hastily, often lacking clean water, proper sanitation, or security. Many resembled prison camps wrapped in barbed wire more than protected villages. Corruption spread as officials siphoned off construction funds and evicted tenants under the guise of security. Villagers received no choice. Homes were burned, farms abandoned, and families forced into cramped settlements. The message was clear: this wasn't liberation, it was disruption. Instead of separating civilians from rebels, the program enraged the population and handed the Viet Cong a recruiting surge. By 1965, the project was an embarrassment, quietly scrapped and never spoken of again. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam collapse. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam was one of the most heavily funded militaries in Asia, equipped with American weapons, training, and technology. Yet behind the modern appearance was an institution crippled by corruption, political appointments, and leaders more interested in survival than victory. Generals inflated troop numbers to steal supplies. Officers sold U.S. fuel on the black market. Soldiers were sent into combat with empty tanks while commanders pocketed the money meant for equipment. Villagers often feared Army of the Republic of Vietnam, officers more than the Viet Cong due to extortion and abuse. Every major test exposed the weakness. During the 1972 Easter Offensive, entire Army of the Republic of Vietnam divisions abandoned their posts. And in 1975, when North Vietnamese forces launched their final assault, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam disintegrated. Cities fell in days. Generals fled disguised as civilians. Helicopters evacuated their families while troops were left behind. Saigon collapsed in less than 2 months, sealing the fate of a nation. The bombing campaign that strengthened the enemy. Beginning in 1965, the U.S. launched Operation Rolling Thunder, the largest sustained bombing campaign in American history. The idea was to bomb North Vietnam until it cracked, cutting supply lines and forcing leaders to negotiate. The opposite happened. North Vietnam adapted, innovated, and dug deeper. The Ho Chi Minh Trail became a masterpiece of logistical resilience. When bombs destroyed roads, new ones appeared overnight. When bridges collapsed, supplies were carried on bicycles or shoulders through jungles. Meanwhile, Soviet-made air defenses shredded American aircraft. Instead of weakening enemy morale, the bombings hardened it. Instead of isolating the Viet Cong, it unified them. And instead of winning global support, it made America look like the aggressor. The nightly news brought images of scorched villages and crying families into living rooms across the U.S., fueling massive anti-war protests. By 1968, Rolling Thunder had consumed billions of dollars. dropped over 600,000 tons of bombs, and accomplished almost nothing strategic. It ended in failure, leaving behind devastation and a broken narrative. And that brings us to the end of one of the most staggering collections of miscalculations in modern military history. If you learned something new today, if this video opened your eyes to the hidden truths behind the headlines, hit that like and make sure to subscribe. Drop a comment below and tell me, which Vietnam War blunder shocked you the most? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious and stay questioning.